professor in the College of Nursing at the University of Manitoba and a member of the Children's Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba. Her research program focuses on family systems expressive arts interventions in health. Her work is guided by constructivist grounded theory and arts-based research methodologies. She is currently conducting a multi-site constructivist grounded theory study that uses a family systems expressive arts framework to explore child and family experiences of and I should have checked pronunciation on this, Christina, forgive me, stem cell transplant. Christina is also conducting 2 systematic reviews, one of which focuses on digital storytelling as a method for research. Christina also has a passion for graduate student mentorship and has led an innovative 4-year mentorship initiative for graduate students in partnership with the International Institute of Qualitative Methodology. Please help me in welcoming Drs. Kendra Rieger and Christina West.
Thank you. I will now give the control of the session to the presenters.
Good afternoon, everybody from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Tina and I are really excited to be here with you to share this hour with you. But before we begin, we'd like to say a big thanks to IIQM and Atlas TI as well for hosting and supporting these webinars. We think it's a fantastic way to keep connecting with our colleagues, both nationally and internationally, especially during the time of the pandemic. So thank you very much. So today we'd like to discuss how Tina and I are building a sustained research collaboration as early career researchers. And the outline for our presentation is not forwarding, so we're trying to figure out how to make the slides forward, Eduardo. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. Our outline for our presentation today is we'd like to share a bit of our story with you and how we came to develop a research collaboration, and then share some ideas with you that have really influenced the development of our research collaboration, starting with the importance of values in choosing who you collaborate with, and then sharing some insights with you that we've received from creativity theorists and from some of the work that they've written. At the end of the seminar, we'd like to also talk about challenges we've experienced with collaborative partnerships in academia and some of the strategies that we've used to overcome those challenges. And then we are really hoping to leave at least 15 minutes for questions at the end. So please, as we go through the presentation, mark your questions down and we'll be happy to discuss them at the end. So starting with our introduction. So I think we should probably tell you who we are. Tina has the red hair and I have the blonde hair. And as was introduced, my name is Kendra Rieger and I'm assistant professor at the College of Nursing at the University of Manitoba. And I was a clinical nurse for 15 years before I entered graduate education. And I joined the first doctoral class at the University of Manitoba, which was focused on a doctorate in nursing. And the focus of my doctoral research was on arts-based pedagogy, which is the integration of the arts with another subject matter to foster student learning. And when I graduated and joined the faculty 3.5 years ago, my research program expanded into arts-based approaches in education and healthcare. And we'll talk more about our research projects as we go through this presentation, but just wanted to say that it was those common interests in arts-based research and arts-based approaches that really drew Tina and I together initially. And quite early in our relationship, when I was still a doctoral student and she was on faculty already, we had to kind of make a decision if we were going to collaborate together or if we were going to be competitive. And maybe some of you have faced that in the past where you've met somebody who had very shared research interests with yourselves. And there came a point in your relationship where you had to either choose to be competitors or choose to be collaborators. So we're going to talk a lot more about that through the presentation.
So, hello, so I'm Tina. As I've been introduced, I'm an associate professor, work with Kendra at the University of Manitoba, and it's just really an honor to be here with Kendra. She is a wonderful research partnership and friend, and I guess when I reflect on this, I think the best case scenario is when you develop partnerships in research, but then also great friendships as well. So I feel honored to present with her today and hope some of what we've learned together might be helpful for you in your own journey. And I'd be really interested at the end to hear your perspectives as well. My research, it's really interesting. So I practiced for 15 years as well in pediatrics, and I've always been really passionate about working with families around children who have serious illness. My PhD research focused on this qualitative study of family systems intervention with families who had a child with cancer. And now, as Juliana mentioned, focus on families going through pediatric transplant, and have added the expressive arts piece, which has been a wonderful experience as I become an academic. And so as we begin, we will talk about some creative theorists that have influenced kind of how we interpret our experience. And Robert Kelly is one of those, and he wrote a book called Creative Development. And he writes that collaboration is a process and a practice that unites two or more points of view in relationship and common purpose. And we're going to talk a lot about that, about really thoughtfully thinking about the purpose we have in our work, as well as how we enter and how we sustain relationships. Really important when we think about working as qualitative researchers, about how we collaborate together. That can involve multiple partnerships, can involve sharing data, pooling our expertise, as well as looking at shared authorship. So really, this is one example of one of the papers we've written together. And I think it speaks to, I think this is about how do we build community in terms of our research practice with one another, and being really thoughtful about that. And so this work that we've shared together is about Kendra and I and our partnership, but lots of different senior mentors, senior researchers who are mentors have influenced both of us. And also we work with many different graduate students who have been incredible to work with. And they're a huge part of the community that we have worked to build together. So as we enter and think about these ideas, I think it's really important that they're helpful to you in some way. And so we wanted to offer you some questions to ponder, just to think about as we talk about our own experience, so that you can think about how this might fit for your own research practice. So two of them we wanted to give you as we start are: why would we choose to work collaboratively? What are some of the benefits? How can that help us? And what are some of the challenges have you faced when working collaboratively? Because certainly we want to acknowledge it can be challenging at times, and also maybe you could also think about what are some of the benefits that have been come to you for working in this way. So when we think about why we would do this, for Kendra and I, just thinking about team research, and there's lots of benefits, I think. So certainly our research can have greater reach, scale, and greater visibility. I think one of the really powerful things is that piece about bringing diverse perspectives. And so those conversations become so much richer, and that leads to much, I think, deeper and a really more rigorous analysis in the work that we share together. I think the efficient division of labor, I think this is a really important one. I think if we work more from that individual perspective, sharing the work together can really make it easier work in many ways. So definitely, I think we've been much more productive because of our partnership. And mentorship and professional growth and learning is such an important part. I think if you think about any point on that academic continuum, so learning from each other, and certainly learning from the students that we work with, but we do learn from each other and are there to support each other. And this photo is from the mentorship initiative, one of the groups that has participated on this slide. So here there are other faculty members and graduate students who are part of this really wonderful community that we are lucky enough to be a part of. And I think the other piece is that qualitative research is not easy research. Well, no research is easy. And so this road is difficult and there's lots of challenges. You face lots of rejection, and how we manage emotionally. Having some people who you share really meaningful relationships and bonds with really helps to sustain you in that process. And I think it's it's fun. So that's an important benefit that comes out of it as well.
So we'd like to share our story with you and about how our collaborative relationship developed before we move on to reflecting on it with theoretical perspectives. So an important part of the story for me is that I was moving from being a PhD student to an independent researcher when Tina and I got to know each other. And I don't know your experience, but I think many of us have not been trained to work in deeply collaborative creative works during our PhD studies. And even though I had a wonderful committee who was very engaged, my work for the most part was done quite independently and quite in isolation. So there were some specific challenges for me as I moved into a faculty position. For example, leading diverse teams of people in creative collaboration. So making sure that I brought my authentic voice as a leader to the table, but also making sure that I made space for the diverse voices around the table. Also learning to work collaboratively with other faculty within a competitive academic environment. And also leading a group qualitative data analysis process was a big learning curve for me, as I had conducted most of my data analysis in my PhD studies on my own and in consultation with my advisor. So for me, when I started on faculty, a real key part of developing those skills were my relationships that I developed with other faculty members. And I am so grateful that Tina and I met early in my academic career, and our relationship was really key as well to me developing confidence in these skills and collaborative work together. So we met like I said, at the end of a long season of working in isolation as a full-time doctoral student. And we actually got to know each other on the initiative that Tina's alluded to, and that we call Deeper Dives into Qualitative Research. And we've carried on this initiative for four years now, and we bring a group of faculty and graduate students to the IIQM Qualitative Health Research Conference. And we all come together as a group, we present, and we reflect on our experiences together. And our very first initiative was just a couple months before I started my brand new faculty position, and I was the graduate student lead and Tina was the faculty lead. And it was really through this initiative that I started feeling like I was leaving the solitude of PhD studies and becoming part of a research community. And I was also very excited about joining faculty and starting to plan my first few research projects. So one of the ideas that I came up with at the conference was that I wanted to conduct a review of digital storytelling as a method in health research. So immediately upon coming back to Winnipeg, I contacted the librarian and met with her and asked her to conduct a preliminary review of the literature to see if previous reviews had been done on this area. And at the end of our meeting, she says to me, "Kendra, have you talked to Dr. Christina West at all about these ideas?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't. Why?" And she's like, "I think you should have a meeting," because I had a really interesting meeting with her. I can't say too much, but I just think you should connect with her. So this was really the start of our research relationship. And I emailed her and asked Tina for a coffee, and we met. And I was a little nervous because I was just finishing my doctoral studies, and she, to me, seemed like an established researcher in the College of Nursing already. And I shared with her that I thought we had probably similar ideas around this research interest, and very graciously, as a faculty member, she offered to lead the project with me. And it really, I think, was the start of a choice that both of us have continued making, and that's to collaborate together. And that actual project has become a very important part of both of our programs of research.
So just in finishing this slide, I think, that's been a great project for us to work on. And Dr. Mandy Kenny, who's one of my important senior mentors, has been involved in that work as well. But I think it just raises for me that question of how do we see graduate students, how do we see PhD students as faculty members, and how are we engaging with them? And I always try to come at it from a relational perspective and just thinking about academia as this continuum that we're all on. And really, they are our future colleagues. And I think it's really important that we see them that way and treat them that way, rather than, you know, in a more hierarchical way, just how important that is. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the synergy in our programs of research and also the value that we found from both having different and shared senior research mentors as part of this. So certainly there are pieces that Kendra and I share a passion for within our research programs, but there are distinct areas as well. And I think that's what makes the experience of our partnership really rich. So we just thought we'd spend a little bit of time on that. And so Kelly writes about how creative collaboration is a culture of involved individuals who willingly contribute their thinking and energy to an agreed upon expression of ideas. And we're going to talk a lot about creativity and community. And I think that creative process, that's where this richness comes, when we bring different things as well as the shared things. So from a philosophical perspective, I think we both share this perspective of constructivist work. Also, in the arts-based research we share this expressive arts philosophy. That's very different than research that is more focused around, for example, medical art therapy. And also, I think we really do share this commitment and perspective of the value and importance of relationship and community. We also have really unique things. I bring a very strong family systems focus into the work that I do, as well as I've got into some partnership-based approaches as well, and hermeneutic philosophy. And Kendra has a really strong grounding in educational theory as well.
We also have some significant shared interests in arts-based methods. We are both using some form of the arts in our qualitative interviewing. Tina's doing something very interesting using a method called dialoguing with images, which you'll hopefully see soon in a publication. And in my projects, I've been working with art elicitation within qualitative interviews in constructivist grounded theory. And the interesting thing is we're each part of each other's projects on the research team. So it's really made for some very rich learnings as we're both exploring using the arts in qualitative interviews, even though we're using them slightly differently. I think that our shared learning has really enhanced both of our research projects. On a very pragmatic note, we've been able to share some research tools. We both have a strong interest in digital storytelling and both have purchased a certain number of iPads for our program of research. But we don't always have enough for the projects that we're doing, so we can share with each other so that we don't each have to purchase the same amount. We also have distinct focuses in arts-based research, which I think is really important as well when you're trying to, as an early career researcher, where you're trying to define your independent program of research. So although we're both studying the arts as an intervention, we're studying it in different ways. Tina's studying expressive arts intervention in pediatric oncology. I'm studying mindfulness-based arts interventions in adult oncology. And so I think that's a good example of how it's important to still have distinct areas, even when you have a research collaboration with many shared pieces.
And I think this also shows up in our methodological approaches. Although we have that core piece of constructivist grounded theory, I think what makes it richer is I began, my PhD was focused on hermeneutic philosophy and interpretive work. So I think to that constructivist grounded theory, I bring a really strong interpretive lens in terms of the analysis. And then Kendra did extensive study of different types of grounded theory and constructivist grounded theory. So I've learned lots of her about constructivist grounded theory as we've moved along. And she also brings us real expertise as well in systematic reviews. And then I think our writing styles are really complementary. And I think that's the other thing you have to sort out as you go along in partnerships is how you write together. And so we certainly have slightly different styles, and I think they really complement each other. And this is one way that I feel really mentored by Kendra. I've had this hesitancy to put my writing work out into the world, and Kendra does that really, really well. So just watching her excitement about that and her support of me emotionally in that process has been a really important piece of my growth and development in that way. And then, as I mentioned, we both have really important senior research mentors that have been played huge roles in our development. For me, one of those would be Dr. Mandy Kenny in Australia, who's on the IIQM board, and Dr. Shannon Scott and others at U of M, and for Kendra, Dr. Tom Hack, Annette Schultz, Donna Martin, and Wanda Chernomis, who was her advisor. So all of those people are important pieces of our community, and certainly some of those we share, particularly Dr. Mandy Kenny.
So we believe that our collaboration has led to innovative scholarly outcomes that really wouldn't have been possible without our research relationship. We've already talked about this, but we really believe that it's led to much more meaningful and rich work, especially in our qualitative projects. But it's also led to increased productivity. And like you, probably many of you, we have yearly evaluations where we need to submit our CVs and meet with our evaluator. And so every spring, Tina and I are exchanging CVs just so we can remember all the different projects we've worked on together. And that's been really wonderful as well to see that increased productivity as a result of our relationship. And you know, it's just a lot more fun to work together, and academics often put in very long hours. So for it to be an enjoyable relationship just means so much. And I think it's really allowed us as well to share aspects of ourselves in our academic work within the safety of a relationship. And for me, this has been very, very important moving into a faculty position where there's lots of growth challenges, where I feel really vulnerable at times. I probably, like many of you, struggle with imposter syndrome. And it's so wonderful to be able to have a colleague I can go knock on her door, tell her how I'm really feeling, and just to hear her say, I totally get it. I felt the same way, or I feel the same way. And just to have some of those emotions normalized. Like Tina mentioned, we don't often talk about the emotions associated with our academic work. And so that's been really a helpful part of our relationship for me.
So as we go further into this, we just wanted to invite you to think a little bit about the importance of values and sustaining really strong collaborative partnerships. And I don't know, I think this is something that I did intuitively, but as we've gone along, I think we've just thought about it in a more explicit way. So how do we choose who we enter partnerships with, and how do we work together? I think just putting some thought into that in a purposeful way is really important in our academic careers. And I think underlying those choices are the values that we choose to bring to our academic life. And I think these choices are really complex because all of us are embedded in this academic system that actually also has inherent values. And often we see values around individual performance. So we're often rewarded for things like first author papers or leading research grants. And so it's really hard sometimes to push back against that. But I think part of what we want to do is introduce the idea that we do have agency in this, that we can make choices about who and how we work together. And certainly there are those situations where we don't have as much choice, but just always keeping that in mind, I think can really guide how we work with different people in different kinds of partnerships. So as we go on, now we know that you probably can't see a lot of these because it's a small font, but we wanted to just give you a sense of how many values there are out there. And you can easily find lists of values on the internet if you're interested in thinking about this more. And really to think through what are the top 3 values. So if you had to choose just 3 out of the list, what would they be? And how might they help you sustain collaborative partnerships?
We'd like to move on to talk a bit about creativity theory and some of our reflections on creativity theory and how it's influenced our collaborative work together. As you probably picked up, we're both very interested in arts-based methods, so creativity theory is an important part of those processes. We've both really we've loved reading Sean McNiff's work, very inspired by him. And one book that informed this presentation is called Creating with Others, the Practice of Imagination in Life, Art, and the Workplace. And Tina's already read a couple quotes from Robert Kelly's book titled Creative Development. So both are highly recommended if you want to read more about this area. So we found that creativity theorists can provide insights also into why and how to work together. So as we all know, qualitative research is a highly creative act. And although many people do view creativity as a solitary activity, and you yourself might, when you think of a creative genius, you might have a picture of somebody who is working alone in a cabin for months and all of a sudden has this great aha moment with this and creates something that changes the world. But really, in reality, many people create together, and creation actually often happens best when it happens in relationships. So although solitude has a place in the creative process, life and new ideas are usually created from the interplay of people who connect, who influence one another, and who generate new things together. So we found that creativity is really a group process in which we bring together our essential natures, our ideas, sometimes they're very different from each other's, and we bring those things together and we co-construct something new together. And we think that this process involves several important processes that make it very powerful. And you've probably experienced some of these. We find when we're working together, we often experience reciprocal inspirations. And I alluded to that when we were talking about the use of arts and qualitative interviewing. We've been inspired by each other's use of that. And from our dialogue with that, we've learned from each other and it's enriched our own work. We've also found that diversity in dialogue fosters theoretical methodological richness in qualitative research. And I especially have found this with Tina and her strong interpretive strengths from her many years in phenomenology and bringing those strengths even to our constructivist grounded theory studies. We've also found that collaboration between researchers and others sparks new ideas to address complex problems. And I think a great example of that is a project we're working on right now. We've come to the end of my constructivist grounded theory, which explored how patients process their cancer experiences through a mindfulness-based arts group. And like many of you, our thoughts are, how can we share these findings in a meaningful way with diverse groups of people? And so through bringing together a really unique group of artists, clinicians, and academic researchers, we are together developing an art exhibit with an audio guide to share these findings with diverse groups of people. So really constructing something new from our diverse expertise. And going back to kind of the fun element of working together, we really believe that the group energy draws people into action. There is some research on that, that when people feel they're working together, they persist longer on challenging tasks, they enjoy their work, they become more engrossed, and it really results in intrinsic motivation, which we know is so important to creativity. And for us, it has really turned work into play. So Sean McNiff, in his book, really addresses workplace as a center of creation. So although he comes from an arts background, he really argues that creating together in the art studio and in the workplace have commonalities. And one thing he really highlights is that those hard places, either in the studio or in our workplaces or in our research careers, can act as sources of creative transformation as the creative process places people and ideas in new relationships. Something else that's been really meaningful for us is reading about conditions that create a culture of creative collaboration. And McNiff and Kelly and other creativity theorists talk about these conditions that create a culture of creative collaboration. And there's many more than what are on the slide, but we just thought we'd share a few that have been especially meaningful to us. So we have found that creating safety has been very important for creative collaboration. So listening to each other in our teams, showing appreciation for diversity so that people can let go of their inhibitions and feel like they can authentically contribute to the process, even when they may hold a divergent position or thought. A really important one is preparing to slow down. And this can be challenging for me because, as Tina knows, I like to work quite efficiently. So there's no shortcuts here. And I think we are just coming to the end of a data analysis process that took 1.5 years with 3 coders. And I think it's resulted in a much deeper and more meaningful set of findings, but it does challenge the cult of efficiency because it's although may be more meaningful, it may not have been as quick as different ways of doing it. Another point under this is preparing to slow down is taking time to actually just be together outside of academia. We think that's really important, and we've really enjoyed going to conferences together. We actually went on a networking trip to Australia and visited Dr. Mandy Kenny there. And that was all really important for our development of our research relationship. Also, leadership is not static. In our collaboration, we have different roles at different times. Sometimes I'm the leader, sometimes I'm the collaborator, sometimes I'm the learner. And we take turns leading projects. Also acknowledging that everyone can contribute on it. You saw some photos of our work with graduate students and faculty. And in that work, we've really moved from top-down version of mentorship to really a reciprocal mentorship model where we all believe we can learn from each other no matter what stage of the academic career we're at. Another important principle to think about is control versus letting go. So really being attentive and learning to when is the appropriate time to let go of your personal position to support the movement of the whole. And lastly, expect struggle. And I know that might sound like a negative note to end on, but McNiff actually encourages us to see it as something positive and encourages us to lean into the places of struggle as they can lead to new insights. And we've certainly found that with qualitative data analysis, where we had different interpretations of a chunk of text, and we have really slowed down and taken some time to really talk about that and have come up with a much more meaningful interpretation because of that. So we'd like to take a minute and, reflecting on some of the thoughts we've shared, take a look at this, this painting, and we'll share in a few minutes a bit more about the painting. But we'd like you to just take a kind of a breather and a reflective moment, thinking about some of these ideas, and answer 2 questions. And these questions are from an approach that's called visual thinking strategies for art observation. But when you look at this group of people, just think about this question: what's going on in this picture? And what makes you say that? So what's going on in this picture and what makes you say that? And we're going to give you about a minute, but as thoughts come to your mind, if you wouldn't mind just entering them into the chat box, and Ricardo is going to read a few of your comments out.
So everybody, you may write your thoughts under chat in the GoToWebinar control panel, but you may also use questions, whichever you want, and I will read them out loud. Should I start reading now, or would you like me to give a few more seconds?
No, it's good to start reading now.
Okay. All right, so here we have families going fishing. They all seem subdued. Clamming at low tide. Building relationships while doing work. Harvesting clams. Dutch families meeting ships with fish, seafood. Taking a break from mundane tasks, engaging with each other as they have not been able to do while focused on other things. Sharing experiences, People gathering food during an economic depression because of the type of clothes and the baskets. A group of women going to the beach. Freedom and play, because I went to the beach yesterday and this reminded me that experience. And the people look very relaxed and at ease. Fish buying because of the boats in the background and baskets. They are preparing to dig for clams at the beach. They have baskets to gather their findings. A group of women in a caregiving role. A collaborative effort with multiple. A job needs to be done to fill the baskets. Parents-child relationships need to be minded, and kids want to play. Women enjoying a moment at the beach. Summer work day, women with baskets dressed informally, going to the beach with children. Perhaps something important is out in the water. Share gaze. Sharing worries. Harmonizing with the elements. An outing by the water, most likely before the 1900s. Women are going to work, some with children. Let me see if there is any. Women walking towards the water, and what makes me say that, because I see the water in the painting, and the little child is pulling his pants up.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Yeah. Okay.
And thank you everyone for your responses. Just hearing your responses just reminds me of the richness of gathering our diverse perspectives together. And we think that's part of the beauty of art, right? Is that it allows us all to see things in new and different ways, and to hear each other's perspectives is so meaningful. So in this painting, it's actually called Setting Out to Fish, and it's created by a European painter, John Sargent, and he depicts a group of peasants walking along a light dappled shore, and he captures the spirit of their everyday work life of fishing together, which many of you picked up on. And when I saw this painting, I really resonated with the diversity of people interacting and working together, each with their own role. Some likely playing the role of mentors, while others learning the craft within the safety of community. And to me, this is what creative collaboration and research feels like. And I think this is really important as well, as what gives us our inner confidence within the competitive world of academia and enables us to collaborate. McNiff writes about how to create with others. You need to focus on what is uniquely yours rather than what you do not have. So to collaborate, you need to know who you are and what strengths you bring to the collaboration, and also what strengths others bring to you.
So as we just finished up, the last pieces, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the strategies that we found to be really helpful in our partnership. But as we go into this, just wanting you to think a little bit about what are the unique qualities and expertise that you bring to your work. And the other interesting thing about partnership is other people sometimes see your expertise in different ways than you do. And so then you realize different ways that you do actually hold expertise. So if you could think about that. And then when you think about your next collaborative research partnership, what expertise would enhance your work? And I guess I would also encourage you to think about what kind of human being would also enhance your experience of the work that you do together in that partnership. So we think about this a little bit too, about finding my people. And I think when you're right out of PhD work, and I think you're finding your people when you're a graduate student as well. But when you become an academic, it's a really important process. For me, certainly IIQM was a really important community for me to connect with people. And Dr. Mandy Kenny, who I talked a bit about, I actually met her in a pre-conference workshop at IIQM many years ago in 2015. Then she came on a major grant with me, which we got. And then that led to other projects, and then her involvement with other people in the College of Nursing. So it's important to remember that just like creativity, research isn't a solitary, it's not solitary work, and we need to find those really great people to work with. Certainly some of the challenges can be geographical distance, disciplinary boundaries, and also the existing frameworks for our evaluation and promotion. Interesting, I think I mentioned this. Did I already mention this? About just through that promotion process, I think sometimes we believe those individual achievements are the things that really count, but when my application went right up to this senior level in the university, the thing that they found really, that they commented a lot on was the relational work and the connection and the community and the work that I've been able to do with Kendra as well as with graduate students. And then in terms of geographical distance, since I met Mandy, we have been on Zoom quite a bit. And I think even now, when we're all in the midst of this global pandemic, it's really hard, especially if you're a new early career researcher, because you don't have all of those or many relationships set yet. So looking for creative ways to connect with one another is really important.
So we've outlined a few of the most significant challenges we've faced as we've grown our collaborative relationship. And I think one of the first things that we faced was authorship. We were both early career researchers, both assistant professors at the time. And the question, if you're doing collaborative work together, both giving to the projects, who's the first author on the paper? And at least in our academic institution, first authored papers are valued and an important part of tenure and promotion. So we have a number of strategies. The first is just really open communication and making a plan, even at the beginning of the project, as to which papers Tina will take first authorship on, which ones I'll take first authorship on, and sometimes we even write it down. And then being really thoughtful about our different programs of research and which papers would be really beneficial for Tina to be first author on, which ones would be really beneficial for me to be first author on. I'm going to quickly go forward to a slide, and then we'll come back to this slide to show you another strategy we've used when we feel like we both contributed fairly equally to a project and it's important to both of us. We've sometimes emailed editors and asked if we can share first authorship, even though it's not typically done with the journal. And here's a positive result of that, where they allowed us to share authorship, and it's our first authorship. It's indicated with a cross, and if you see at the bottom, the cross indicates equal contributors. So we are seen as both first authors on this paper. And I think that paper is also a good example of that project, which is our digital storytelling review, which is going to have 3 publications coming from it: the protocol, the review findings, and then an ethics paper. And we've already have a plan in place for how we'll each share or take first authorship on each of those papers.
So the other thing we just wanted to touch on, and we've talked a bit about this, are academic constraints and academic currency. Certainly, we are rewarded for those individual pieces. With the authorship, that's one way we've got around it. But when we think about creative collaborative work, it requires, and sustaining those partnerships, I think that it's a really long-term strategy, and you have to be committed to that long-term. And I was thinking about this, and I think sometimes it does involve making a choice that I'm going to continue to invest in this relationship versus think about my academic career in this moment. And then I recently watched this beautiful documentary about the art world called The Price of Everything. And they were interviewing this one artist, and she just kept saying, I think about the long term. And she said, I want to do work that matters. And I think about that a lot when I think about Kendra and me and our partnership. I think when you find these partnerships, that's what helps you do the work that matters. But that does require that commitment, and you have to be in it for the long term. Even when those moments of difficulty come up, we don't always agree with each other, and we both are fairly strong and have the ability to voice our opinions. So having patience and working through that is a really important process in the partnerships that you pursue. And then I think these things are really important to think about in COVID-19 and all of the physical distancing. We touched on that, but just staying connected and committed to those projects that are the work that is really important. Really to think about that carefully and thoughtfully is really important during this time, I think. So those were our ideas, some strategies. We'd love to hear if you have different ideas related to this. We are always open to new ideas, and we're always learning in this partnership. So our contact information is included on the slide, as well as our Twitter addresses. And we just also at the end just wanted to highlight this amazing work IIQM is doing with these webinars, connecting us together. And there is one again next week. So Dr. Bukola Salami is going to be talking about community-based participatory action research. And she's from U of A, and you can find information about that at the link on this slide on their website. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share some of our experiences. We hope you take something away, and we'll open it up for questions now.
Thank you very much. We have 12 minutes left, so about 10 minutes for answering questions. So here is one. I am from Chiapas, Mexico. I would like to start a collaborative work with other researchers on the Saskatchewan Indians of Canada and the coincidences with our Indigenous people. How can I link without knowing each other physically? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially right now with COVID-19, right? The way I've connected, well, I've connected with people in different ways. And I think sometimes it happens like when you're in that conference, and I mentioned Mandy in that pre-conference workshop. But I think I think Twitter is another really interesting avenue, because I've certainly developed connections on Twitter with different researchers. If I see somebody, for example, Kendra does Indigenous work. So if I see somebody who's doing interesting work around that, I'll send it to her. And, you know, if you follow each other, you can send some direct messages through Twitter, email. There was one mentor I have in the US, and what I did there was I actually sent a formal letter introducing myself, talking a little bit about the work that I was doing, and seeing if we could have some conversation. So sometimes I think it's taking courage, looking for the people you think their work is interesting, sharing some of the work that you've already done, but just kind of going after that and seeing what happens. And I think you can do that in a virtual space right now, even when you can't physically get to conferences.
I think, yes, I agree with Tina. I think there's like both challenges and opportunities during this time with the pandemic, but we've all learned to be much more comfortable by video. And in the last 6 months, I've had 2 other early career researchers reach out to me by email, and we went back and forth a bit and realized we really had common interests, and I've had video calls with both of them. And we're not doing projects right now together, but we are talking about future projects. I think it takes a little while, like a few video calls and getting to know each other, reading each other's work. But you know, eventually something might work out with those projects. So just taking the initiative, being clear with what you're asking for, and just taking it slowly, you know, having some video calls together, talking about shared interests.
Yeah, and I think as just when you're a little bit more established, I think we should be looking out for people that are more junior than us. And if they're just starting, or if they're PhD students, and there's somebody in our network we think would be helpful to connect them with, that we should be more active in helping that process along too. Is there another?
So let's see, another one. How you both are you both counted as first author, as first authors, or well, the question is how you both counted as first author publication. So the question is not very clear, but has to do with whether who is the first author.
I think they're referring to the publication we showed right at the end, where we are both listed as shared authorship. So we are both counted as first authors on that paper, and on our CVs we actually have another notation. So we list the author list, and then we have stars, and then at the end of our citation in brackets we have shared first authorship, and our university has accepted that as shared first authorship.
A number of journals will do that. Actually, IJQM did that for us on a paper, and QHR recently I asked them, and they agreed to do that. And the other thing was, like Kendra gave the example of the systematic review. So we're both counted as first authors, but then you have to choose one person to be listed first. And so the way we worked that out with that digital storytelling systematic review, because there would be multiple papers out of it, then we'll just alternate which one of our names goes first, even though we always share the first authorship on all of those papers to make that as fair as possible.
Okay, another question from Arturo is, well, he wrote, excellent presentation. How do you divide work when you have to do the final report? How do you divide the writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it should be really related to authorship, right? So on the paper we just showed you, the digital storytelling protocol, what we often do in a situation like that where we're sharing first authorship is we'll both go write pieces of it, and then we'll book writing times where we write side by side, or using a Google Doc or something like that. And we've learned that was a process of learning to do that, but we actually really enjoy it now. So we do some independent work, kind of both divide the work and do it, and then come back together and then really write through the paper together. Whereas a review on mindfulness-based arts interventions, which I'm more taking the lead on, I wrote the draft, and then Tina took it and did some really lovely revisions to it. So somewhat related to the author position.
Yeah, but I think that's a really important thing to think about. I think from my experience as being like an early career researcher, my tendency was always to like write everything myself. Mm-hmm. And now I've started to play with different ways of sharing that. And I think part of that is Mandy pushed me a little bit on this, that I had to like stop carrying everything myself. And the other piece about that is like, I have to come to see myself and the teams that I work with as mentoring other people who have less experience writing. And so now I'm setting up different systems where we look and go through the literature together using some Excel spreadsheets that we share on a cloud-based system. And then we actually do some writing together. And I'm trying to we each give suggestions and kind of do some of that shared writing. Then we'll go off and do a little bit on our own, and then come back together and do some editing together. So I think it's a bit of playing with different things to see what works with you, depending on who your team is. And like Kendra said, I think for every project, it might look slightly different, but I think finding ways to share it, I think there's a responsibility to share that with other people, and play a mentoring role in that as you're learning yourself. It's really complex.
I think it also depends on your writing strengths, and who has what strengths in writing, and that can also influence how you work together.
Okay, we are getting very close to the end. Let me see if we can answer one question more. Yeah, well, I am also involved in collaborative research, but find it difficult to find protected research time. Any ideas on how one can ensure continuous protected time to engage data collection, but specifically reading and writing?
I guess both Tina and I have some protected research time as part of our contracts with the university, but we understand it's still very challenging to actually protect that time in your schedule. So a couple real practical strategies I've used is blocking writing days, and my university does allow us to have writing days apart from the university, so at home. So really just slotting writing days in my calendar where I book nothing else, and then also early morning writing before the emails start. So I often try to book a writing time in from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning, and I find that's a really good way to do it. How about you, Tina?
Yeah, I think that's challenging. I started out where I was better, if I had a huge chunk of time to write, and just as you go along, it's just not reasonable. So I do think part of it is, like Kendra has said, it's helpful to figure out what's the time that I'm best with the writing. And I'm finding lately that it is morning too, and then just shutting down the email and shutting down any social media and just having it as a protected space is really important. And I must say for me, there was an emotional component with it, so that Sean McNiff, he refers to this, it's not his paper, but another paper, something about the terror of the white page. I think just pushing yourself to just get it down on paper and get into that process, and just kind of managing some of those emotional things and putting limits on, you know, the other responsibilities you have. That my teaching, I say I'm going to do the best that I can with it, but I need to prioritize the research and the writing that I'm doing and make sure I have that time to put to those activities, and doing the best you can to manage all of that.
I think collaborating together in writing can also protect time, because if I know I've committed to Tina to write for 4 hours with her, it's like an appointment. So I can't book another appointment on top of it because there's like another person meeting me to do it.
And the other thing I'll say is about this time is with Zoom. I used to like actually physically go and meet my co-authors at a different university to actually do the writing together. But knowing you can do it through Zoom, it's much more convenient. And yeah, if you have that weekly meeting, you know you have to get something done for that time that you're going to meet together. That's been a helpful thing for me as well.
Thank you so much for sharing this hour with us and for your thoughtful responses, and for this opportunity to share in the webinars, Ricardo.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, everybody. And we are closing now. Thank you. Goodbye.